Hello everyone and welcome back to another Canadian Politics Explained video. And in today's video we're going to be going over the recent climate summit that occurred between countries virtually due to the COVID-19 pandemic. During this summit, the United States under Joe Biden established that they were going to set their emissions target, or emission reduction target, at 50% of 2005 levels by 2030, so 2030. Canada, however, only announced a reduction to 40% of 2005 levels. And today we're just going to be talking about how this is going to affect politics and what this means for people all over these countries. So today we're just going to discuss how this will affect Canadian politics and how Canada's emission levels have changed since 2005 and before that since 1990. So this graph shows the greenhouse gas emissions of Canada in tons. This is metric tons, I believe. But as you can see here, Canada's emissions have increased since 1990. So in 1990, they were at 462.2 trillion tons. In 2005, they hit 576.43 million tons. And then in 2019, it stood at 576.65 million tons. So as you can see, this shows that Canada's greenhouse gas emissions have increased significantly since 1990, and this is mostly due to increased oil sands production in the western provinces of Alberta and Saskatchewan. So this is obviously a huge economic driver for these provinces, so the government can't really shut down production here, because that would ruin the economy of Alberta and Saskatchewan if they just shut down production outright. So this is why Canada, under Justin Trudeau, has decided to only set their target at 40% of 2005 levels, as they have actually increased their emissions since then, only by a little bit, only by 6.5 million tons, but it's still an increase which is rare among G7 countries, as all of them, according to this New York Times article, Canada is the only one which increased its greenhouse gas emissions since the Paris Agreement, and also since 2005, as a lot of countries in the G7 have managed to decrease their emissions since signing the Paris Agreement, and before that even, like the EU and the UK, who have decreased their emissions by, or since 1990, and the US has been decreasing their emissions since 2005. This means that Canada still has set a less ambitious target than the USA has on greenhouse gas emissions, and so this could hurt their standing on the world stage as a leader in the climate, in the fight to save the climate. However, the Environmental Minister of Canada, Jonathan Wilkinson, still says that Canada is still one of the world leaders in climate change, as seen by this article. And as you can see here, he says that Jonathan Wilkinson. And as you can see here, this article just goes over how the different countries have set new targets that are significantly higher than Canada's. For example, the UK has said that they're going for a 78% cut from 1990 levels by 2035. And the US, obviously, as I mentioned before, has set their emissions reduction target at 50% of 2005 levels. So, as you can see here, the Trudeau government's plan for reducing carbon emissions mainly centers around the carbon tax, because they are set to increase the price of emitting carbon to 170 Canadian dollars per ton by 2030, as right now it stands at a lot less than that, at about $25 per ton. So this definitely will drive companies to reduce carbon emissions. However, many analysts and experts say that more needs to be done if they are going to meet this target. And it is worth noting that the targets are only targets, and more action does need to be taken in all countries in order to hit those targets, because right now, if things stay the same, there's no chance that any country will hit their target, including Canada, and especially countries like the USA, where the last president cut back many climate restrictions and thus opened the door to increased emissions. So as you can see here, if I scroll down in here, people do say, or experts do say, that Canada's plan is ambitious, especially considering the Trudeau government's plan to keep the oil sands strong and open for the years to come. However, if I go to this New York Times article here, this is more critical of Trudeau's strategy, as it does mention how the oil sands emissions are increasing, and there needs to be something done to stop these emissions from increasing, because otherwise they will have no chance of hitting their target. So this New York Times article does argue that one of the best ways to combat the emissions from these oil sands is by acknowledging that they are unsustainable and need to be shut down within the next 20 years or so, and then providing funding to switch the economies of these provinces away from, the provinces of Alberta and Saskatchewan, their economies away from relying on oil and relying on other industries instead, such as the service industry, which is more sustainable in the end and will lead to less emissions and make hitting the target that Justin Trudeau has set much easier. So here, as you can see here, right now it is 40 Canadian dollars per ton of carbon emitted for the carbon tax. But as I mentioned before, they are scheduled to increase this to $170 by the end of the decade. And Canada here says that they are already on track for a 36% emissions reduction, which argues for the fact that not much more needs to be done in Canada in order to reduce their emissions to their target. And this supports the environmental minister's argument that they are not trailing the world in emissions, as currently they are technically a world leader, considering the US's lack of action on climate change. And this climate summit is still ongoing, but it's become clear that many countries of the world are becoming more committed to having a more unified approach to fighting climate change, as with the last US administration under Donald Trump, many environmental regulations were rolled back and he pulled out of the Paris Agreement. So this disrupted global cooperation on climate change, as anything that the world did or the UN did would not be followed by the US, because Trump was skeptical of climate change and thought that restrictions needed to be rolled back in favor of quote-unquote economic growth, according to him. However, as you can see here, if I go back here, Canada's change in emissions has been going up and down. So in 1990, I didn't change the scale of this graph before. So from 1988 to 1991, emissions in Canada were decreasing pretty consistently, actually, because as you can see, emissions were reduced by about 9 million tons each year. But then they experienced a huge amount of spiking and decreasing. But overall, if I go back here, it has gone up, as the spikes upwards have been bigger than the spikes downwards on the whole. But here, this is the cumulative carbon emitted by Canada. And as you can see, this is a very high number at 31.95 billion tons, which has been tracked since, I guess, they started tracking these numbers. Obviously, a lot of these numbers are estimates, as these figures are definitely not set in stone. But this is our World and Data's estimate. And if I scroll up here to per capita emissions, this has been stagnating ever since the beginning of the century, and it actually has gone down. A lot, as you can see here. And in the per capita emissions, as you can see, they have been pretty consistently going down since the beginning of the millennium. In 2000, they hit a peak at 18.71 tons per person, but ever since then it has been decreasing, and currently it stands at 15.59 tons per person in 2017. So as you can see, Canada's emissions have been decreasing as of recently, but overall, they are still lagging behind some of the world's other countries like the UK and the EU, which have had decreasing emissions for a longer time than Canada has. And despite Canada's increased action on climate change, they still need to do more in order to catch up to these countries if they intend to do so. And just one more thing here, if I analyze the poll tracker here for a little bit, as you can see, the Liberals are beginning to take a more commanding lead in the polls. And if I scroll down here to seat projections, and as you can see here, they're projected to win 176 seats, which is higher than they've been for the past 6 months. As you can see here, they've been hovering around 171 to 168 or 67 seats. But now they've been able to take a more commanding lead, and now they're projected to win 176 seats, as they have been able to make some gains in Ontario as of recently. And also due to increases in Alberta, which actually has gone down recently, but they still did experience a little bit of a blip here. And also they've experienced increases in Quebec due to the Bloc Québécois losing support in the province. As you can see here, the Bloc support has been sliding recently, as now they've lost 2% from the beginning of April. So this is where the Liberals are actually gaining some seats, which is enough, which will give them more, I guess, padding, so they have a better chance of winning a majority government, as they do not need as much support in Alberta and the prairies. Also, Atlantic Canada, they've been able to consolidate their support here. As you can see here, the NDP, as recently as April 6th, were projected to win 1 seat, and the Conservatives to win 5. But now the Liberals have been able to take away the NDP's seat and and flip 2 Conservative seats that are currently projected, or that were projected to go to the Conservative Party. So this climate announcement, what effect will it have on politics? Well, we'll have to wait and see, obviously, because we don't really know what Canadians will think of the new target. They might think that it's unnecessarily high, or they might think that it's not ambitious enough, and think that Canada should aim higher like other countries like the United States have. And this would most likely be the NDP voters or left-leaning Liberal voters. And the people who think that it's too ambitious most likely would be Conservative voters, as they are strongly opposed to the high price of the carbon tax that Justin Trudeau has put in, and his plan to increase the carbon tax price to 170 Canadian dollars by the end of the decade. So that's all I have for you in today's video. Just before I end the video, I do have another project coming out, which should be coming out within the next week or two. It's a more scripted video, and it should be, yeah, as I said, it should be coming out in the next week or two. And hopefully you'll enjoy it. Just be on the lookout for that in the next 2 weeks. So that's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.